I'm Republican, and the Nazis. Making excuses for dictators is nothing new, Mr. Republican and the Nazis. GOP's boy crush on Putin and Orbán shouldn't be surprising, consider legendary Republican Senator Robert Taft. Eaders may be familiar with Rachel Maddow's explosive new podcast, Ultra. It tells the incredible story of a German spy who infiltrated Congress in 1940-41, inducing 24 congressmen and senators to spread Nazi propaganda in floor speeches, op-ed columns and constituent mailings. Simultaneously, armed extremist groups began training for a violent takeover of the country. In many ways, the 8-decades-old story is a disturbing forerunner of the Trump era. Contrary to our nostalgic memories of unity, America was deeply divided over the war in Europe, military aid to Britain, and whether fascism was the wave of the future that we might as well submit to. While political division on the eve of entry into the war was not uniformly partisan, some prominent Democrats supported isolationism. The GOP was by far the party that stood for America first and strict non-involvement in foreign conflict. That members of Congress would willingly become conduits for Nazi propaganda shows that for some, sincere concern to stay out of war was not their only motivation. There was surprisingly strong domestic sympathy for Hitler and the fascist powers. Those who actively worked for Germany crossed the line into subversion and treason, but even mainstream proponents of isolationism showed a tolerant understanding for fascism that, decades later, seems either shockingly naive or disgracefully callous. It is easy enough to write off Father Coughlin or Charles Lindbergh for their overt anti-Semitism and admiration of totalitarian regimes. But there is one America firster who to this day is almost universally celebrated by the GOP as a statesman exemplifying pure, principled conservatism, three-time aspirant for the Republican presidential nomination, Senator Robert Taft. He was such a pillar of the GOP that he was dubbed Mr. Republican. He has neither Lindbergh's Nazi sympathizer reputation, nor the still lingering stench of Joseph McCarthy's witch hunting a decade later. Mainstream historians, even while deprecating his politics and calling his opposition to aiding Britain misguided, nevertheless give him points for principle and integrity. Conservative think tanks churn out mini hagiographies of Taft. National Review recently proclaimed him as Middle America's sorely needed answer to wokeism, whatever that may be. Taft's Senate career spanned from 1939 to 1953. He came to Washington as America was recovering from a shattering depression, and then had to confront fascist militarism. After World War II, the country faced challenges from two former allies, the Soviet Union and Communist China, with the stakes raised by the existence of nuclear weapons. How did Taft respond to this decade of existential crisis? From the moment he entered office, he campaigned relentlessly against the New Deal, cleaving to Herbert Hoover's futile notion that rugged individualism and private charity would end the worst depression in modern history. In 1940 Taft wrote, "There is a good deal more danger of the infiltration of totalitarian ideas from the New Deal circle in Washington than there will ever be from any activities of the Nazi Bund." While asserting the need for a strong military, Taft nevertheless fought tooth and nail against preparing that military. He opposed both the Destroyers for Bases deal with Britain and repealing the Neutrality Act. He also voted against the Selective Service Act at a time when the German army, fresh from a lightning conquest of Western Europe, had 4.5 million soldiers when the U.S. Army numbered only 269,000. If someone who had followed the debate over aid to Britain in 1940 were magically transported to the present, he would have little difficulty getting oriented to the global situation, both in its military precariousness and in the threat of advancing dictatorship. And if he heard Josh Hawley or Rand Paul proclaiming America first on the floor of the Senate, he could be forgiven for hearing the voice of Robert Taft.